Looking for a summer project that you can sew by hand or by machine? Why not try this paper piece snow cone? To get started, you'll find links to this pattern below. Gather up a few scraps and your basic sewing supplies and you're ready to begin. First, cut out your pattern along the dashed lines and then crease your pattern on the dark lines. When you paper piece, your fabric gets placed on the back of the pattern in numerical order. Fabric number 1 must be large enough to cover area number 1 with a little extra left over for seam allowances. Let me put this on the back. I'll pin it in place, and I see that I have extra fabric all the way around for those seams. I'd like to fold this paper back and trim to about 1/4 inch seam, but it's not necessary. Fabric number 2 will end up here, but it has to be placed on the back. It will end up looking something like this, but in order to sew, you have to put right sides together. So I'll flip that over and I come back to this side. This is where I'll be sewing. I like to pin on this sew line to check to make sure that after sewing this, I can fold it back. I see that this fabric's going to cover this whole area plus the seam allowance all the way around. I use red thread so you can see, but you want to use a neutral color thread. So I started stitching along that fold line and then stitched all the way down the dark line and off to the edge of the paper. Then I pressed. Now I can trim off this excess or leave it. I'd like to get it out of the way a little, so let me get some of that off, and I'll use this up in this corner later. Fabric number 3 goes here. Let me turn it over. It's going to end up looking like this. I'll put right sides together. Now notice I didn't trim this ahead of time, which is okay, but it's a little bit trickier to check. So I'll put a pin on the sew line and I'll fold this back, and I want to make sure that that covers this whole area, and I can see that it does. So I'll take this over to my sewing machine and stitch. I started stitching before the dashed line, came all the way down and ended after that line. Since I didn't trim this out beforehand, I need to trim it out now. So I'll fold back this paper, and you'll see that it wants to hold up right there, and it's okay just to tear that a little. And I'll take my scissors and trim out so that there's about 1/4 inch seam there, and then I'll take it over to be pressed. After pressing, I'll trim out some of that excess. Fabric number 4 goes here. I'll turn it over. I'm going to go right here. So I put right sides together, and I'll pin again just to check. So let's see. We'll cover that area, and I see that it covers all the way around with extra for the seam allowance. So I can take this over and sew on that line. Sewed from edge to edge, and then I pressed. Since this piece is so big, I'm going to pin it in place while I do the next 2 sections. Fabric number 5 is going to go here. I'm going to trim that to about 1/4 inch. Let me get some of this excess off the top. And while I'm at it, I'll also trim where fabric number 6 is going to go. I had these pieces left over from earlier, so fabric number 5 is going to go right here. It'll look something like this when it's done. So I put right sides together, and sometimes these little pieces are tricky. So I'll check just to make sure. I'll pin that sew line. I'll fold this back to make sure that all that area is covered, and then sew. I sewed from the dashed line to the dashed line on both of those, and then I pressed. Trim the edges with the rotary cutter or your scissors. Here's my completed block. If using this for a card or a gift tag, you can leave the paper in, but if you want to put this into a quilted project, you'll want to remove this paper, and you can start by placing your finger over the thread and gently start tearing. Once you get the first piece off, the rest of it just sort of falls away. You can also sew this block by hand, but you'll want to leave that paper attached. Hope you get a chance to make one of these. They go together quickly, whether sewing by hand or by machine. You can frame these or add them to other small projects. If you'd like to purchase a kit for this block, check out the link below to our shop. For more free quilting tutorials, please visit learnhowtoquilt.com. To get updates and free patterns, click on the link below to sign up. Please share our site and videos with your friends. Thanks.